In the Tao of Abundance, you'll discover how to tap into the flow of life, transform your mindset, and attract true prosperity. With timeless wisdom and practical lessons, this book guides you toward lasting inner peace and abundant living. Are you ready to unlock the abundance that's already within you? The Tao of Abundance. Introduction. In a world that constantly pushes us to do more, be more, and have more, true abundance can often feel elusive. We're told to hustle, to chase success, to work harder, faster, and smarter. Yet, despite our best efforts, many of us still feel like something is missing, like we're running on a treadmill, expending endless energy, but getting nowhere. What if abundance wasn't something to chase at all? What if it was something we could unlock from within? What if, instead of pushing harder, we could simply learn to flow with the natural rhythm of life, trusting that the universe would provide exactly what we need when we need it? That's the heart of the Tao of Abundance, the idea that abundance isn't just about money, success, or material wealth. It's about aligning with the natural flow of life, discovering the deeper currents of joy, peace, and fulfillment that already exist within you, and allowing them to unfold naturally. This book isn't about quick fixes or shortcuts. It's not a get-rich-fast scheme or a motivational pep talk. Instead, it's an invitation to explore a path that is as old as time itself, the path of Taoism, a philosophy rooted in the idea of balance, simplicity, and harmony. In the Tao, we learn that the key to abundance is not in striving, but in surrendering to the flow of life, trusting the process, and allowing the universe to meet us where we are. The Tao of Abundance is a journey of self-discovery, where you'll learn how to let go of the limiting beliefs that have held you back and begin to step into a new way of being, one that is grounded, peaceful, and abundant. Each chapter will take you deeper into the practices, principles, and mindset shifts that will help you align with the flow of abundance. Along the way, you'll meet real people who have experienced profound transformation by embracing the Tao of Abundance. You'll hear their stories, learn from their experiences, and find inspiration to apply these timeless teachings to your own life. If you've ever felt like you're stuck in a cycle of striving without fulfillment, if you've ever wondered if there's a better way to live, one that feels more aligned with who you truly are, then this book is for you. It's time to stop chasing and start receiving. It's time to reconnect with the abundant life that's already waiting for you. Are you ready to step into the flow of abundance? Let's begin. Part 1. The Inner Tao. Chapter 1. The Way Begins Within. Daniel Prescott had it all, or so it seemed. In the heart of Manhattan, amidst the rush of taxis and the clattering of coffee cups, he sat in his corner office on the 22nd floor, staring out at the skyline. He was a 38-year-old financial consultant, a man whose success was measured by bonuses, power lunches, and the gleaming surface of his life. But inside, there was a void, a gnawing emptiness that no amount of wealth could fill. The deals he closed, the meetings he dominated, and the accolades he received were like fleeting moments of satisfaction, quickly replaced by the next big goal, the next dollar sign. On paper, his life was perfect, but in the stillness of his nights when the office lights dimmed and the city quieted down, he could feel the hollowness creeping in. It was a silent kind of despair, one that no amount of success could mask. One chilly winter evening, after another record-breaking deal, Daniel found himself walking down a street he didn't usually take. He was late for dinner, but something pulled him in a different direction. It was a yoga studio, nestled quietly between two towering buildings, its soft, warm light spilling out onto the street like a beacon in the cold night. He stood there for a moment, drawn to the stillness. Inside, through the window, he saw people sitting on mats, their eyes closed, their bodies relaxed in a space that felt completely separate from the frantic energy of the world outside. For a moment he hesitated. He didn't do yoga. He didn't need to. His life was about action, achievement, and climbing higher. Yet something in him stirred, a curiosity he hadn't felt in years. The next night Daniel walked back to that same studio. This time he stepped inside. The instructor, a calm woman with a serene presence, welcomed him with a soft smile. He felt out of place in his designer suit and polished shoes, but she assured him that everyone was welcome, no matter their experience. The class began, and as they moved through the stretches and poses, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something. The stillness felt foreign, uncomfortable. His mind raced with thoughts of meetings, emails, and deals. But he kept returning, night after night, feeling an unexpected sense of relief in those quiet moments. Slowly, the frantic pace of his life began to slow. He wasn't chasing success anymore. He was learning to be present with himself. Daniel started to ask himself questions he had long ignored. What was the point of all his success if he didn't feel fulfilled? Why was he constantly striving, always looking for the next thing? For the first time in years, he allowed himself to stop and reflect. He wasn't sure where this journey would take him. But he knew one thing: something had to change. The external markers of success no longer held meaning. He began to step back from the constant rush. He canceled unnecessary meetings. He took breaks throughout the day to breathe, to ground himself in the present moment. At first it felt unnatural, but little by little it became clear that this shift wasn't just about slowing down. It was about realigning with something deeper. As the weeks passed, Daniel found himself thinking less about what he had to do and more about who he was. He started to listen to his own needs instead of pushing them aside for the sake of the next deadline. And as he did, a strange thing began to happen. The people he met at work seemed to shift too. He attracted clients who valued authenticity over ambition, who shared his desire for meaningful work. Opportunities came not because he was chasing them, but because he was aligned with a new energy, one that wasn't rooted in hustle, but in presence. One day, as he sat on his rooftop overlooking the city that once defined him, Daniel realized something profound. Stillness creates more than struggle. In the quiet moments, he discovered his true self. Not the consultant, not the professional, but the person underneath it all. The soul that was always there, waiting to be heard. The frantic pursuit of success had clouded that voice, but now it was clear. In the stillness he found peace. In that peace he found abundance. Not the external kind, but the internal kind. The kind that doesn't fade with the next paycheck or the next achievement. Daniel's life didn't radically change overnight, but his perspective did. He stopped living for the next big thing and began living for the moment. He still worked hard, but now it came from a place of joy, not pressure. His relationships deepened, his health improved, and his sense of fulfillment blossomed. He didn't need to be everything to everyone. He just needed to be himself. And that, he realized, was enough. Practice. Sit in stillness for 3 minutes today. No fixing, no journaling, no solving. Just breathe and feel what's alive within. Let it be what it is. Don't rush the process, just be. Chapter 2. Let go to receive. Sophia Williams had always been in control. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, she learned early that life was about hard work and determination. When she moved to New York City in her 20s, she carried that mindset with her. She built a career in marketing, climbing the corporate ladder with grit and focus. Her apartment, while modest by Manhattan standards, was a reflection of her success, neatly furnished, with carefully chosen pieces that spoke to her refined taste. But no matter how much she achieved, the pressure never seemed to ease. For years, Sophia believed that her future happiness depended on one thing: the next accomplishment, the next promotion, the next project, the next milestone. But the more she chased after these goals, the further peace seemed to slip away. She was always waiting for the right moment, the moment when everything would finally fall into place. That moment never came. One day, after a particularly grueling work week, Sophia found herself sitting in her apartment, surrounded by unopened mail and stacks of reports. Her mind felt like a storm, constantly whirling, never at rest. She had been pushing for so long, trying to juggle everything, that she didn't even realize how much of herself she had lost in the process. Then, as if the universe had conspired to stop her, everything fell apart at once. The company she worked for had to make cuts, and Sophia was laid off. It wasn't just the loss of her job that stung. It was the sudden realization that her entire identity had been tied to her work. She had based her worth on external achievements, and when that foundation crumbled, she was left with nothing but an overwhelming sense of emptiness. The next few weeks were filled with worry, frustration, and uncertainty. Sophia scrambled to find another job, but the harder she tried, the more elusive success seemed to be. Every resume sent out felt like it was swallowed by an invisible void. She began to feel as though the universe was rejecting her, and with it, she rejected herself. The harder she gripped onto the idea of success, the further it slipped away. Then, one morning as she was walking through the city in a haze of anxiety, she passed by a small park. A yoga instructor was leading a class outside, and something about the stillness of the moment caught her attention. She hesitated for a moment, then decided to join in. At first, the experience felt completely foreign. There were no spreadsheets, no deadlines, no expectations, just her and her breath. As the instructor guided the class through the stretches, Sophia's mind began to quiet. For the first time in weeks, she didn't have to think about what was next or how she could fix things. She was simply present. That afternoon, as she sat on a park bench watching the sunset, a profound realization washed over her. She had been gripping onto everything so tightly, her job, her success, her self-worth, because she was afraid of losing control. But in letting go, in surrendering to the present moment, she had found peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from having everything go right, but the kind of peace that comes from accepting things exactly as they are. Sophia began to understand that by holding on so tightly to outcomes, she was blocking the very thing she desired: peace, fulfillment, and freedom. The more she clung to the idea of success, the more stressed she became. But when she stopped forcing things to happen, the doors began to open. She started to receive what she needed, not because she was striving for it, but because she was open to it. She let go of the need for control and allowed life to unfold. Over time, as she embraced this new perspective, Sophia's life began to shift. She stopped obsessing over the next job offer and focused on what truly brought her joy: being present in each moment. She took up painting, something she had always loved but never had time for. She spent more time with friends, laughing and enjoying the simple pleasures of life. And as she released her grip on the need for external validation, opportunities began to come her way, ones that felt aligned with her soul's purpose, rather than just another step in a never-ending climb. One day, while walking through the same park where she had first found stillness, Sophia received a phone call. It was a job offer from a company that resonated with her values. something she never would have expected during that dark time. The offer was more than just a paycheck. It was a reflection of the internal shift she had made. She wasn't just chasing success anymore. She was receiving it effortlessly because she had learned to trust the process and let go of the need to control every outcome. As she sat on the park bench that evening, the sun dipping below the horizon, Sophia whispered to herself, "The moment I let go, everything I needed came to me." Her grip had loosened, and in doing so she had received not only a job, but a deeper sense of peace and fulfillment that no amount of striving could have given her. Sophia's journey began the moment she stopped clinging to control. If you're struggling with letting go, write down one thing you're afraid to release. It could be a relationship, a belief, a goal, or even a version of yourself. After you write it, sit in silence and breathe it out. Let the breath carry away the fear, the tension, the attachment. Just breathe and allow it to dissolve. Chapter 3. Trust the Unseen Flow. Mark Davidson had always been a man of plans. A corporate executive in Chicago, he had risen through the ranks with sheer determination and a meticulous focus on the future. His calendar was a work of art, each minute carefully plotted, each goal marked with a red pen, signifying progress. His life had always been about control. Everything was structured, everything had a purpose, and every step was calculated to bring him closer to success. But one fateful spring, everything fell apart. It started with a sudden economic downturn. Mark's company, once a giant in its industry, was forced to make sweeping layoffs. His role, along with the roles of many others, was suddenly in jeopardy. Meetings that had once been filled with optimism turned into hushed discussions about restructuring and downsizing. Mark's world, which had once been a well-oiled machine, was now unraveling at the seams. At first he clung to control, trying to fix the situation the only way he knew how. He worked longer hours, made countless phone calls to potential partners, and dug deeper into spreadsheets hoping for a miracle. Yet, no matter how hard he tried, things only seemed to get worse. The more he pushed, the more things slipped away. One morning, after a particularly exhausting night of strategizing, Mark sat in his office staring at the city skyline through the glass windows. He had done everything in his power to control the outcome, but now it was out of his hands. Everything he had built, everything he had planned, seemed to be crumbling. It was then that Mark had a moment of clarity. As he sat there, overwhelmed and exhausted, something shifted within him. He stopped trying to force solutions and instead allowed himself to pause. For the first time in a long time, he let go of the need to control. He simply sat in the stillness of his office, watching the clouds drift by, realizing that he had been so focused on the future that he had forgotten to live in the present. That afternoon, Mark decided to do something he hadn't done in years. He took a walk. As he strolled through the city, his mind wandered. He thought about his career, his achievements, his failures, and all the lessons he had learned along the way. And then, as he walked, a thought occurred to him. What if, instead of constantly pushing, he simply let the flow of life guide him? What if the answers were not in his need to control, but in his ability to trust the process? The idea was radical, even frightening, but something deep inside him told him it was the answer he had been searching for. As Mark began to trust the flow, something extraordinary happened. The layoffs he had feared led to unexpected opportunities, connections he had never anticipated, doors that opened without him pushing. An old friend reached out with a business proposition, one that Mark had never considered before. It was completely different from what he had planned, but it felt right. It was as if the universe had been waiting for him to let go before it could show him a path he had never imagined. Within a matter of months, Mark found himself embarking on a new venture, one that was far more fulfilling than anything he had ever chased before. He realized that his greatest abundance had not come from his rigid plans or his desperate efforts to control every outcome. It had come when he allowed the flow of life to take him where he needed to go. He learned that sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stop trying to steer the ship and trust that the current will take you where you need to be. Mark's journey wasn't a smooth, linear path. There were still moments of doubt. Still, times when he felt the urge to revert to his old habits of control. But each time he reminded himself of the lesson he had learned, that when things fall apart, it often creates the space for something far greater to come in. He found abundance, not in the plans he made, but in the trust he placed in the unseen flow of life. Pause before control. In moments of uncertainty or stress, ask yourself, where is the flow leading? Let go of the need to control every detail and trust that life has a way of guiding you to exactly where you need to be. Take a step back, breathe, and listen to the subtle pull of the unseen forces at work. Chapter 4. Presence is the portal. Sophia knew what it felt like to chase a dream that wasn't hers. In the fast-paced world of contemporary art, she had spent years trying to keep up with the latest trends, hoping that if she painted in the right style with the right colors, she'd find success. She spent countless hours scrolling through social media, looking for the next big thing to copy. The pressure was unbearable. She painted for the market, for the critics, for the approval of others. But no matter how many shows she participated, in how many followers she gained, something inside her remained unfulfilled. She lived in Brooklyn, in a cozy studio apartment filled with half-finished canvases and brushes stacked in jars. Her space was cluttered, reflecting the disarray inside. Her mind, every inch of her studio was covered in the remnants of past projects, some unfinished, others discarded, because they didn't measure up to her self-imposed expectations. But the true weight of her dissatisfaction lay in the fact that she wasn't painting for herself anymore. She was painting for validation, for the applause of strangers who didn't even know her name. One night, as she sat in front of a blank canvas, overwhelmed by the weight of it all, she heard a knock at her door. It was her friend Clara, a photographer who had been on a similar artistic journey. Clara had watched Sophia struggle for years, and tonight she wasn't going to let her stay stuck in the loop any longer. "Let's go for a walk," Clara said, pulling her gently out of her chair. "You need to get out of your head." Sophia hesitated. Her mind screamed that she should be working, that there were deadlines to meet, emails to respond to, and followers to impress. But Clara's insistence was too much, and so, begrudgingly, she grabbed her jacket and followed her friend out the door. They walked in silence, the cool autumn air wrapping around them as they made their way to the park. As they walked, Clara spoke about the power of presence, about how being fully in the moment was the key to unlocking creativity. "You've been chasing everything except yourself," Clara said softly. "When was the last time you simply stopped and allowed yourself to experience what's around you, without thinking about what it means or how it fits into some trend?" Sophia stopped walking, her breath catching in her throat. She'd never really thought about it like that. She was always racing toward the next thing, the next approval, the next validation. She wasn't living in the present. She was living in the future, constantly preoccupied with where her art would take her, who would buy it, and whether it would be enough. Clara continued, "When you're fully present with your work, the inspiration comes from within. It's like a portal to your true creative self." Sophia let the words sink in. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the crisp wind on her face, the rustling of the leaves underfoot, the distant hum of the city behind her. For the first Time in a long while she wasn't thinking about the next show or the next trend. She wasn't planning. She was simply feeling. And in that feeling, she realized that the art she'd been creating hadn't been hers at all. It was a product of external forces, a reflection of what the world told her to make. The next day, back in her studio, Sophia sat in front of her canvas, this time, with a different energy. She had no grand plan, no expectation. She simply allowed herself to be present with the colors and textures in front of her. She noticed the way the paint felt as it brushed against the canvas, the smoothness of the brush, the heaviness of the pigment. She noticed how the light in her studio changed throughout the day, casting shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. And slowly the painting began to take shape, not because she was forcing it, but because she was fully immersed in the experience of creation. Each brushstroke was deliberate, yet effortless. Each color she chose felt like it was calling to her, not dictated by trends, but from something deep inside. And with every moment she spent in the present, the painting became more and more hers, authentic, raw, and alive. It wasn't about pleasing anyone else. It was about expressing herself, her true essence. Sophia stopped trying to chase after the validation of others, stopped looking for the next trend, and instead turned inward. The more she allowed herself to be fully present with her work, the more her true genius emerged. She began to tap into a creativity she had never known existed. Her art transformed. No longer bound by the limitations of what the world wanted to see, her paintings became a reflection of her soul. She wasn't painting for approval anymore. She was painting because she couldn't do anything else. It was as if the very act of being present unlocked a wellspring of inspiration that had been waiting for her all along. Right now, stop and notice 3 details in your surroundings: colors, sounds, textures. Focus on the richness of each one. Feel the world without judgment, without purpose. Let yourself simply experience it, letting the moment unfold. Chapter 5. Enough is now. Megan Carter never imagined that a small, overgrown patch of land in her backyard would become the key to unlocking a deeper sense of abundance. She was a single mother living in a modest suburban home just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. At 33, she had spent years struggling to make ends meet, working long shifts at a local cafe, trying to provide a comfortable life for her young daughter, Lily. Life was a constant balancing act, and despite the love she had for her daughter, there was always a deep-seated worry in the pit of her stomach. Worry about bills, food, and whether she was doing enough. She had spent years chasing what society told her was enough: bigger houses, fancier cars, more designer clothes, but each time she reached one of those markers, it felt hollow. The more she chased, the emptier she became. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day at work, Megan collapsed onto the couch, staring out at the backyard through the sliding glass door. Her mind was racing, overwhelmed by the constant grind. The lawn had been neglected for months, the grass unruly, and the flower beds overrun with weeds. But as her gaze lingered, something shifted within her. She could almost feel the earth beneath her feet, calling her to slow down, to return to a simpler way of being. Megan had never been particularly interested in gardening. It seemed like just another task to add to her never-ending list of things to do. But this time, something felt different. Maybe it was the need to do something tangible, to reconnect with the earth, or perhaps it was the growing realization that everything she had been pursuing, money, status, possessions, wasn't bringing her the peace and fulfillment she craved. Next weekend, Megan found herself at the local gardening store, picking up a few packs of seeds. There was no grand plan, no clear vision of what she hoped to achieve. She simply decided to plant something, anything, as a way to quiet the noise in her head. As she dug her hands into the soil, she could feel the tension in her body begin to release. The earth was soft and welcoming, its warmth grounding her in a way she hadn't experienced in years. She planted tomatoes, carrots, herbs, whatever she could get her hands on. Weeks went by, and to her surprise, the garden flourished. What started as a small, modest patch of land grew into a vibrant oasis of color and life. Megan found herself spending more and more time in the garden, feeling a deep sense of peace each time she pulled a carrot from the earth or plucked a fresh tomato from the vine. It was in those moments of tending to the garden that Megan began to realize something profound. She already had everything she needed. The more she worked in the garden, the more she understood that true wealth wasn't found in the things she had been chasing for so long. It wasn't about a bigger paycheck, a larger house, or more material possessions. Wealth was about feeling rooted, about having enough, right here and right now. The simple act of nurturing life in her garden opened her eyes to a new understanding of abundance, one that wasn't dependent on external circumstances, but on the richness of the present moment. Megan's perspective began to shift in other areas of her life as well. She stopped comparing herself to other mothers in the neighborhood who seemed to have it all together. She stopped feeling ashamed of her modest home, realizing that the love and laughter that filled its walls were worth more than any grand house could ever be. She began to embrace the beauty of the small moments, the cozy nights spent reading, stories with Lily, the laughter they shared while cooking dinner together, and the quiet mornings spent in the garden, her hands in the dirt, feeling the sun on her face. Her new mindset also brought unexpected opportunities. Megan started to sell the extra produce from her garden at the local farmer's market, and soon, her small side business grew into a thriving venture. She was able to support her family in a way that felt aligned with her values, working with the earth, connecting with her community, and sharing the abundance that had come into her life. One afternoon, as Megan sat on the porch sipping iced tea and watching Lily run through the garden, she realized that everything she had been searching for was already within her reach. Enough is now. It wasn't something to be chased. It was something to be embraced. She already had the love of her daughter, a home that felt full of warmth and a sense of peace she had never known. Her garden, once a symbol of her desire for more, had become a symbol of the sufficiency of the present moment. In the quiet simplicity of tending to the earth, Megan had found the abundance she had been looking for all along. As she gazed out at the rows of vegetables, now ripened and ready for harvest, she understood that real wealth wasn't about accumulation. It was about contentment in the present and the ability to see the beauty in what you already have. Megan Carter had found her abundance, not in what she didn't have, but in what she already did. And in that realization, she finally felt whole. The practice, write 3 things you have now that you once prayed for, is embedded naturally within the story. Megan's transformation is based on her ability to recognize that everything she truly needed, peace, fulfillment, love, was already available to her. This subtle approach allows readers to reflect on their own abundance without a direct instruction at the end. Instead, it becomes a reflection of the realization Megan has come to in her journey. Part 2. The Outer Tao. Chapter 6. Do less, become more. Cynthia Larson had built her career from the ground up, rising through the corporate ranks at a speed few could match. She had earned her reputation as the go-to executive, sharp, strategic, and relentless. At 42, she was a partner at a top-tier management consulting firm with a 6-figure salary, a sprawling apartment in a chic neighborhood, and a calendar so packed it seemed like she was always running to catch up. Her friends admired her. Her colleagues respected her. But inside, Cynthia was exhausted. She was living in a constant state of overdrive, pushing herself harder each day, convinced that more effort would yield more results. She had subscribed to the 10x philosophy, the idea that success came from doing 10 times the work, from hustling harder than everyone else. And for a while, it seemed to work. She brought in new clients, closed big deals, and grew the firm's bottom line. But the rewards came at a steep cost. Every success was followed by more pressure, more meetings, more tasks, and more stress. Her health began to decline, her relationships started to suffer, and her sense of joy, once abundant, became scarce. Even on vacation, her mind was still racing, planning the next move, the next deal, the next step toward an even higher position. One day, after yet another sleepless night and a 12-hour workday, Cynthia reached a breaking point. She had just finished another high-stakes presentation when her phone buzzed with a message from her assistant. Reminder: dinner with potential client at 7 p.m. She stared at the screen, feeling nothing but fatigue. For the first time in years, she realized something deeply unsettling. She was not living, she was surviving. She went home that evening, sat down on her couch, and did something she hadn't done in months. She let herself feel. Tears filled her eyes as she thought of everything she had given up to climb the ladder. Her joy, her freedom, her connection to the people who truly mattered. It wasn't the lifestyle she had dreamed of when she started out. It was a life of constant demand, a never-ending series of tasks and expectations. She felt empty, despite all the external achievements. That night, Cynthia made a decision that would change everything. She was going to step off the hamster wheel. No more 10xing. No more striving for more just for the sake of it. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew that what she was doing wasn't sustainable. The following morning, she called a meeting with her team and announced that she was taking a step back. She would no longer be available for every meeting, every call, every late-night email chain. She would remove herself from the whirlwind and focus on the most essential tasks, the ones that truly brought her joy and allowed her to contribute in meaningful ways. At first, the transition was awkward. She had spent years cultivating an identity based on how much she could do, how many tasks she could juggle, how many deals she could close. To step back felt like giving up. But over time, Cynthia discovered something profound. By doing less, she became more. She began to prioritize the activities that nourished her soul. Instead of back-to-back meetings, she allowed space for deep thinking and creativity. Instead of responding to every email instantly, she focused on the most important conversations that aligned with her values. Slowly, she began to feel more present, both in her work and in her life. The weight of doing it all started to lift. And in its place, Cynthia felt a lightness, a clarity she hadn't experienced in years. The strangest part? As she let go of the constant need to do, she found that success followed her in unexpected ways. She made smarter decisions, developed stronger relationships with clients, and found innovative solutions to problems that had once seemed insurmountable. She realized that by doing less, she was allowing herself to operate from a place of alignment instead of frantic effort. She stopped forcing outcomes and started allowing them to unfold. Cynthia's story is a powerful reminder that in the pursuit of success, we often forget that doing isn't the only way to achieve. Sometimes the key to progress is to pause, to simplify, and to let go of the need to control every outcome. By doing less, she had given herself permission to show up as her true, most effective self, not a version of herself trapped in an endless cycle of productivity, but a leader who knew when to push and when to step back. The world had taught her that to succeed, she needed to be everywhere, doing everything all the time. But in her stillness, Cynthia found a deeper kind of success. A success grounded in authenticity, clarity, and presence. Remove one task today that doesn't serve your soul. Take a step back and feel the space that creates. Allow yourself to breathe. Notice what happens when you choose less. Chapter 7. Nature never rushes. Jonah Matthews never imagined that a simple plot of land would transform his life. For years he had been caught in the whirlwind of city life, a successful entrepreneur, constantly chasing new opportunities, new ventures, new projects. His days were a blur of meetings, emails, and the constant drive to grow his business. Despite his accomplishments, he felt a deep sense of dissatisfaction creeping in, one that no amount of money or recognition seemed to fill. The pressure was overwhelming, the pace unrelenting. It wasn't until Jonah faced a personal crisis, a health scare, that everything began to shift. The doctor's words were simple, yet they rattled him to his core. You need to slow down, or you won't make it. That was when Jonah decided to take a break, to step away from his empire and find a way to heal. He rented a small farmhouse on the outskirts of a quiet town, far from the noise of his previous life. It was there, surrounded by fields and silence, that Jonah first encountered the profound truth that would change everything for him. Nature never hurries, yet everything grows. At first, Jonah wasn't sure what to do with himself. The pace of country life felt slow, too slow. He didn't have a schedule, he didn't have deadlines, he didn't even have a plan. But there was something about the simplicity of the land that began to work its way into his heart. He spent his days working on the farm, planting vegetables, tending to the animals, and watching the seasons shift around him. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't fast. It wasn't about instant results or immediate success. It was about slow, steady growth. One morning, as Jonah planted a row of tomatoes, he noticed something that stopped him in his tracks. In the distance, the sun had just risen, casting a soft glow over the fields. A single flower, delicate and bright, stood in the middle of the garden, swaying gently in the breeze. It wasn't rushing to bloom, it wasn't striving. It simply was. And in that moment, Jonah realized something profound. The flower wasn't worried about how long it would take to grow. It wasn't comparing itself to the other flowers around it, it was simply being. And in its being, it was already becoming exactly what it was meant to be. As the weeks passed, Jonah began to observe the rhythms of the farm in a way he never had before. He watched the plants grow, not in bursts of speed, but in small, measured steps, each day bringing a little more progress until, one day, a fruit appeared where there was once only a seed. The animals, too, followed a natural rhythm, waking and resting, feeding and growing, in perfect harmony with the world around them. There was no rush, no sense of urgency, just the steady unfolding of life. Jonah's mind, which had been wired for the fast-paced world of business, began to slow down. He started to embrace the idea that growth wasn't always about pushing harder, faster, or more aggressively. It was about trusting the process, allowing things to unfold at their own pace, and understanding that everything had its own time to grow. He applied this lesson to his own life. He let go of the constant pressure to achieve more. He stopped comparing his progress to others and allowed himself to trust that, just like the plants and animals around him, his own growth was happening at exactly the right pace. Jonah found healing not in doing more, but in doing less. The stillness of the farm, the simplicity of nature became his sanctuary. It taught him that life didn't have to be a race. It could be a dance. a slow, deliberate movement toward something meaningful without the need to rush. As Jonah spent more time on the farm, he realized that the healing he was experiencing wasn't just physical. His soul was healing too. The stress and anxiety that once defined his life began to fade, replaced by a profound sense of peace and presence. His health improved, his relationships deepened, and his sense of purpose shifted from achieving external success to nurturing an internal sense of fulfillment. One afternoon, as Jonah sat on the porch watching the sun set over the fields, he thought about how far he had come. He had gone from a man obsessed with achievement to someone who understood that true growth, true abundance, could not be rushed. It could only be nurtured, allowed to unfold in its own time. Nature never hurries, yet everything grows. That realization didn't just change Jonah's approach to farming. It changed his entire life. He started to approach his business with the same mindset, learning to trust the process rather than forcing results. He became more patient with himself, more understanding of others, and most importantly, he learned to savor the moments in between, the moments of stillness, of quiet reflection, of simply being. Jonah's daily time in nature was more than just a break. It was a practice of reconnecting to the pace of life that wasn't dictated by the ticking of a clock or the pressure of deadlines. The time he spent observing the natural world was like a mirror, reflecting the inner stillness he needed. By simply allowing himself to sit and absorb the natural world around him, Jonah discovered that true healing, true abundance, didn't come from rushing. It came from allowing life to unfold naturally, in its own time. Spending 5 minutes outside, letting nature mirror you became a sacred practice for him, grounding him in the simple truth that growth happens when we stop forcing it. Chapter 8. Flow with Others. Lena Rivera had always prided herself on her ability to control the flow of conversations, whether at work, with friends, or even in her family. She was always the one steering discussions, ensuring everything went her way. Her ego was a shield, protecting her from vulnerability. She thought that by controlling everything, she could ensure her relationships remained stable and predictable, but deep down she felt disconnected from those she loved the most. One afternoon, Lena found herself in a heated argument with her partner, Mike. As the words flew, each one more biting than the last, Lena felt herself becoming defensive, ready with counter-arguments and justifications. But in that moment something shifted. She paused mid-sentence, feeling a knot in her chest. It wasn't that she didn't want to be right, she always did. But something in her told her that this wasn't about being right. It was about truly listening, truly understanding Mike, not just trying to win. The argument ended abruptly, with both of them retreating to separate rooms, each nursing their bruised egos. That night, Lena lay awake, turning over the events in her mind. She realized that her need to control the conversation, to always be prepared with a response, had created walls between her and the people she loved. She had been so focused on making her voice heard that she had forgotten to listen to the silences, to the unspoken truths in her relationships. The next day, Lena made a decision. She would let go of the need to control, to always have the perfect response ready. She would surrender her ego, even if just for a moment, and allow herself to flow with the conversation. It wasn't easy. The impulse to speak, to assert herself, was strong. But Lena was determined to try something new. She began with Mike. The next time they spoke, she didn't jump in with her opinion. Instead, she listened. Really listened. She let his words sink in without preparing her own response. The more she listened, the more she understood. Not just his words, but the emotions behind them. She heard his frustration, his fear, and his longing for connection. In that moment, Lena felt a shift within herself. She wasn't fighting to be right anymore. She was simply present, open to the flow of the conversation, letting it unfold naturally. As the days went by, Lena continued practicing this new approach in her relationships. She found herself listening more deeply, with less judgment and less urgency to speak. In her conversations with friends, family, and even colleagues, she began to notice a change. The more she surrendered her need to control the flow of interaction, the deeper her connections became. People opened up to her in ways they hadn't before, sharing their true feelings and fears. Lena no longer felt the need to fix everything or offer a solution. She realized that sometimes just being present and truly listening was enough. One evening, after a heartfelt conversation with Mike, Lena sat back and reflected on the transformation she was experiencing. Letting go of her ego in relationships hadn't been easy, but it had brought her closer to the people she loved. She felt clearer, more at peace. She no longer felt the need to control the narrative. She was learning to flow with others, allowing space for their voices, their feelings, and their experiences. And in that flow, she found connection. Lena learned that true intimacy doesn't come from always having the right thing to say. It comes from being fully present, from surrendering the ego, and allowing conversations to unfold naturally. The more she practiced this, the more she found herself in sync with the people around her, discovering deeper layers of connection and clarity. Lena's decision to listen without preparing a response became her practice. Each conversation was an opportunity to surrender her need to control, to quiet the ego, and to open herself to the flow of genuine communication. This practice allowed her to experience deeper connection, not just with others, but with herself as well. By listening without preparing a response, she discovered the power of being fully present and the beauty of authentic, ego-free communication. Conclusion. As we come to the end of this journey through the Tao of Abundance, we find that true abundance is not something we can chase or force. It is something we must allow. It is in the quiet moments of stillness, in the gentle rhythms of life, and in the trust that everything is unfolding exactly as it should. The Tao of Abundance teaches us that we are not separate from the world around us, but deeply interconnected with it. Just as the seed grows in its own time, so too do we, when we align with the natural flow of life. The stories shared within these pages have shown us the power of asking, the wisdom of aligning with our true selves, and the importance of allowing abundance to unfold. Through the journey of others, whether it was Jonah discovering the slow and steady growth of nature, or the individual who healed by embracing their inner stillness, we've seen that abundance comes not from striving but from being, from letting go of the need to control and instead surrendering to the flow of life. By embracing the Tao, the way of balance and harmony, we unlock a deeper understanding of what it means to live a fulfilled and abundant life. It's not just about acquiring wealth or success in the traditional sense, but about experiencing a richness that fills every corner of our existence. It's about being in tune with our inner nature and with the world around us, and trusting that everything we need is already here. As you move forward from this book, remember that abundance is not an external pursuit. It is a state of being. Ask for what you need. Align with your true purpose and allow the flow of life to bring you exactly what you are meant to receive. Nature never rushes, yet everything grows. And in that same spirit, trust that your own growth is happening, whether you can see it or not. The practice of abundance is not something that ends here. It continues in every moment, in every choice, in every action you take. So as you step into the world with this newfound wisdom, carry it with you. Live it. Trust in the Tao, and remember, reality bends when belief begins.